The morning light pooled across the marble floor of Wardcore's main lobby. A pale winter sun diffused through glass walls 50 feet high. Everything shimmered with a cold, sterile polish, the kind of brilliance that made the wealthy feel important and the unsure feel small. It was almost silent, save for the soft hum of elevators and the distant clatter of keyboards drifting from the mezzanine. Then a sound pierced the stillness. A thin cry. "Hi, trembling, wounded." Guests and executives turned their heads. By the center column, near the cascading indoor fountain, a little girl crouched. On the floor, both hands clamped over her ears. Her dark hair hid her face as her shoulders shook with uneven breaths. A security guard took one hesitant step toward her, then stopped, scanning the crowd as if waiting for someone more qualified to intervene. "She's having another episode," a woman in a tailored skirt suit whispered. "Where's her handler?" Someone else murmured. "Should we get PR? We can't have this in the lobby." But nobody moved closer. The girl rocked gently, her sneakers tapping the marble, each tap echoing like a tiny fracture through the hall. Her name, though no one there dared say it aloud, was Eva Ward, daughter of Wardcore's CEO, the most protected and whispered about child in the building. They all knew her, and yet not one of them knew what to do. The elevator chimed. A man in a faded gray janitor uniform stepped out, carrying a cleaning caddy and a mop slung casually over his shoulder. His ID badge hung slightly crooked, its edges worn from years of swiping. He paused, taking in the scene. A few employees glanced his way with impatience, silently willing him to hurry to whatever minor task he had been assigned. Lucas Hale ignored them. He set down his caddy beside a planter and took a slow breath, the kind that gathers courage before approaching a wounded animal. Then he walked toward the little girl. "Sir, maybe don't," the guard began. Lucas lifted a hand, gentle but firm, not dismissing, not rebelling, just choosing not to hear. He stopped a few feet away and lowered himself to the floor. Not close enough to intrude, just close enough to be there. His knees touched the marble with a soft thud. The child didn't look up. The lobby held its breath. Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small plastic bottle of solution, worn at the edges. He twisted the cap, dipped the ring wand, and lifted it to his lips. A bubble drifted upward, round, delicate, tinted faintly blue by the overhead skylight. The second bubble caught a shard of sunlight and glowed brighter. On the third, Eva's rocking slowed. Her fingers loosened from her ears. Her eyes tracked the fourth bubble as it bounced lightly on the air, floating toward the fountain before bursting in a soundless shimmer. The faintest shift crossed her expression, not calm, not yet, but curiosity fragile as frost. Lucas blew another, and another. The blue reflections skimmed across the marble, gliding like little ghosts of light. The crowd began to disperse, unsure whether to feel relieved or embarrassed. The guard stepped back, watching the bubbles instead of the child. Finally, Eva lifted her face. Her cheeks were streaked with tears, but her breathing steadied as she reached out, fingers trembling, toward the drifting color. "That's it," Lucas murmured, voice so soft only she could hear. "Just watch." From the mezzanine above, Melanie Ward stood motionless. Her heels were planted at the edge of the glass railing, her hands gripping it so tightly her knuckles paled. She had arrived to welcome a foreign investor, but had forgotten him entirely the moment she saw her daughter collapse. For years she had tried everything: therapists, dietitians, sensory rooms with soft light and curated textures. None of it had brought more than a few minutes of peace. And now, in full view of her, employees, a janitor was doing what no specialist had achieved. A single bubble floated upward toward her. It trembled, suspended for a moment in the air between them, then burst in a gentle sparkle. Melanie turned and walked briskly toward the elevator. Downstairs, Eva's breathing had evened out. She watched Lucas blow one last bubble, then slowly lowered her hands to her lap. No words, no smile, but a shift, a quiet surrender to stillness. Lucas stood carefully. He didn't touch her, didn't reach out or ask questions. He simply gave her one small nod, picked up his caddy, and turned toward the staff hallway. "Excuse me." He froze. Mezzanine Ward approached like a silhouette carved from authority. Sleek black suit, hair pinned flawlessly, expression composed but unreadable. The surrounding employees parted instinctively, pulling back against the walls. "Come with me," she said. It wasn't a request. Lucas followed her through the secure doors, into the private executive corridor lined with frosted glass and soft recessed lighting. The contrast to the lobby was shocking, quiet, insulated, almost clinical. Inside her office, she closed the door and gestured to a chair. He stayed standing. "That was unusual," she said. Lucas's eyebrows lifted faintly. "I wasn't trying to cause a scene." "You didn't cause one." Mezzanine paused. "You stopped one." He looked at the floor. "She just needed something else to focus on. Something gentle." "Who taught you that?" Mezzanine asked. Silence stretched a few seconds before. He answered. "I used to teach special education," Lucas said quietly. "Before life changed." Her eyes sharpened with interest, not pity, not skepticism, but something like recognition. "And you left that field?" "I lost my wife, and my daughter was young then. I couldn't be in classrooms for a while." He swallowed. "I took this job because it was steady." Mezzanine folded her arms. "Eva hasn't responded to anyone like that in almost a year." He didn't respond. He didn't boast. He didn't shrink. "I want you to come to my home," she said finally. "Spend time with her. Help her communicate. I'll compensate you appropriately." Lucas let out a low breath. "I don't want compensation. I just want terms." "Terms. No cameras," he said. "No observers. No recording. Sessions for payer. If I come, I work for Eva, not your board." Mezzanine's jaw tightened, but not in anger. In acceptance. "Fine," she said. "No cameras." Lucas nodded, as if sealing a pact. "Then I'll come." Outside, the marble hall gleamed in chilled silence. But something warm, almost imperceptible, had begun to stir, like the faint afterglow of a bubble that refused to vanish. Completely. And for the first time in a very long time, both Lucas and Mezzanine stepped out of that office, carrying the smallest flicker of hope. The elevator to Mezzanine Ward's penthouse rose with a soft hydraulic sigh, its glass walls revealing a skyline washed in winter light. Lucas stood beside his daughter, Becca, as the city slowly disappeared beneath them. She clutched her backpack straps tightly, her feet shifting on the mirrored floor. "Are you sure she wants us there?" Becca asked. Lucas exhaled. She asked, "That's enough for now." When the elevator doors opened, the first thing they noticed wasn't the space. It was the silence. The penthouse looked like something from an architecture magazine. High ceilings, white walls, chrome fixtures, surfaces polished to a sterile shine. Every piece of furniture was precise, minimalist, wrapped in pale fabric untouched by fingerprints or human warmth. The air smelled faintly of eucalyptus and something colder, like a hotel room no one had slept in for years. A woman in a muted gray dress approached. "Mrs. Ward is expecting you. This way, please." As they followed her through the open living area, Becca's eyes widened at the sculptures and glass partitions. But Lucas saw something else, the absence. No scattertoys. No paintings taped to refrigerators. No soft blankets thrown across couches. Even the sunlight that streamed through the panoramic windows felt distant, as if it had been filtered through layers of expectation. The woman opened a tall door with a soft click. Inside, Eva sat on the floor near the window, a sketchbook balanced on her knees. She didn't look up when they entered. Eva's room did not match the rest of the penthouse. The furniture here was smaller, softer. A shelf of textured objects lined one wall, smooth stones, wooden blocks, fabric squares. The curtains were sheer, allowing the light to fall in gentle ribbons across the carpet. Still, the air felt fragile, like one wrong sound could shatter the moment. Lucas knelt slowly a few feet from her. Becca remained by the door, quiet but curious. "Hi again," Lucas murmured. Eva's pencil paused mid-stroke, but she didn't turn her head. He didn't move closer. Instead, He pulled a sketchbook from his bag and settled cross-legged on the floor. He flipped to a blank page and began to draw. Slow lines. Nothing detailed, just shapes, circles, a few swooping arcs. The faint scratch of graphite filled the room. Becca eased down beside him. "Can I draw too?" Lucas nodded and handed her a spare pencil. She began sketching softly, glancing occasionally at Eva as if waiting for a cue. After several minutes, a shadow shifted on the carpet. Eva had inched closer, maybe an inch, maybe two, but enough for her shoulder to be brushed by a slant of light from the window. Lucas kept drawing, resisting the instinct to look up. He slid his sketchbook ever so slightly toward her, a quiet invitation, not a request. Eva hesitated, then tilted her head, watching the pencil move. She reached forward tentatively, touching one edge of Lucas's paper with her fingertip, tracing a line he had drawn. Becca whispered with a small smile. "I'm Becca." Eva didn't answer, but her eyes lifted, briefly, barely, toward the older girl. Then she returned her gaze to the drawing. It was the closest she had come to acknowledging another child in months. Lucas felt something loosen inside him, like a knot that had been pulled too tight for too long. And then, without warning, the room shifted. The soft sunlight across the carpet grew warmer, turning almost golden. The lines on the page blurred. The scratch of pencil against paper faded, and suddenly he wasn't in the penthouse anymore. He was sitting beside a hospital bed. His wife's fingers, once so strong, lay limp against the sheet. For lines glimmered in the dim yellow light. Machines hummed in slow, heavy rhythms. The smell of antiseptic clung to the air like grief in liquid form. "Stay," she had whispered. Her voice had been barely a breath. "Just stay." Lucas blinked hard. The memory dissolved, but its ache remained, settling deep in his ribs. He felt his chest tighten, breath catching as though the room had thinned of oxygen. He placed the pencil down. Becca caught the shift instantly. "Dad, I'm okay," he murmured, though his voice wasn't steady. Eva looked up fully this time. Her eyes, dark, round, full of something he couldn't name, studied his face. He met her gaze and tried to smile, but something fragile flickered behind it. He didn't want her to see the pain. He didn't want anyone to, because the more he connected, the more he feared the inevitable echo of loss. He didn't know if he could survive another fracture. Eva leaned forward by a fraction. Her small hand rested lightly on the edge of his sketchbook, not touching him, just anchoring him. It steadied him more than words ever could. A soft rustle came from the doorway. Melanie Ward stood there, one hand pressed lightly against the frame as though needing support. She had intended to remain unseen, to observe from a distance, but what she witnessed now stole the air from her lungs. Lucas, quiet, steady Lucas, sat on her daughter's floor with a look of grief he thought no one could see. Becca sat close, one hand ready to steady him. And Eva had moved toward him, breaking through the invisible walls she kept around herself. It was not a breakthrough therapists could chart. It was not progress that could be captured in a report. It was something human, delicate, unguarded. Melanie felt something lodged deep in her chest, a mixture of astonishment, guilt, and a tenderness she had long forgotten how to access. She stepped back, not wanting to interrupt. For the first time in years, she didn't impose structure or ask for explanations. She simply watched. Inside the room, Lucas took another breath, slower now, more grounded. He picked up his pencil and continued drawing, this time with Eva leaning a little closer. When he finished sketching a simple blue circle, he slid the page toward her again. She placed her fingertip inside the circle, like choosing a place inside a world he had made safe for her. Becca whispered, "She likes it." Lucas nodded. "I know." Outside the door, Melanie closed her eyes briefly. Then she composed herself and walked softly down the hall, aware of a fragile truth forming between them. Her daughter was opening, but not because of expensive specialists or carefully designed therapy rooms. She was opening because someone who knew grief could recognize hers, and because for reasons she could not yet understand. Lucas Hale carried a gentleness strong enough to touch what the world had broken. Behind him, the white light of the penthouse glowed brighter, softening the stark lines of the walls. The cold space didn't change, but the people inside it had begun to. The dining room of the penthouse didn't resemble the rest of the house that evening. The overhead pendant lights had been dimmed to a soft gold, casting a warm glow across the long table. The stark whites and cool silvers of the room blurred gently into something more human, as if light alone could coax warmth back into its walls. A small round table had been set instead of the formal 12-seat one. For chairs, for sets of simple plates, cloth napkins folded without precision. It looked, unexpectedly, like a family trying. Lucas and Becca arrived right on time. A housekeeper ushered them in with a smile that felt nervous rather than polite. In the kitchen, the soft clinking of utensils suggested that someone had instructed the staff to keep things quieter tonight, gentler. Mezzanine stood by the counter, smoothing the front of her blouse. When she saw Lucas and Becca step in, she offered a nod, a gesture that was less formal than before, almost shy. "Thank you for coming," she said. Becca returned a small wave. "It smells really good." Mezzanine blinked. "I cooked some of it." Lucas raised an eyebrow, and she quickly added, "Only the simple items." A faint flush touched her cheeks. When they sat down, Eva was already seated, staring at her plate. A small bowl of soft pasta, steamed vegetables, and a slice of bread sat before her. Her hands were in her lap, fingers curled nervously, but she didn't seem afraid, just waiting for something she didn't yet know how to name. Lucas sat beside her, but left a gentle gap. Becca sat beside him. Mezzanine took the seat opposite. For a moment, no one moved. Then Lucas reached for his fork, tapped it lightly against his plate so it made a soft, musical chime, barely audible but enough to shift the air. Eva's eyes flicked toward the sound. "That's dinner music," Lucas said lightly. "Only for special nights." Becca grinned and tapped her fork in imitation, adding her own tiny note. Mezzanine hesitated, but after a second, she tapped her spoon once, the sound bright and soft, like a bell inside a cathedral. Eva blinked. Then, slowly, she reached for her fork. The first bite she took was small and cautious, but everyone at the table felt it, a kind of collective exhale, a loosening of breath they hadn't realized they were holding. The sound of her chewing, gentle and real, seemed louder than the city noise drifting faintly through the glass. They talked quietly. While they ate, the conversation simple. "How was your day, Becca?" "I drew a picture of Dad's old truck." "What color?" "Green, but I think I'll change it." Through it all, Eva listened. She didn't look directly at Lucas, but she didn't shrink from him either. Her shoulders seemed less tense, her breathing more even. When dessert came, just slices of soft pear, something shifted. A bubble of light from the pendant lamp reflected on the white tablecloth, creating a faint circle of pale blue. Eva stared at it. Her fingers brushed its edge. Then she pointed and whispered, barely audible, "Blue." The word fell into the silence like a drop of color into clear water, rippling outward, impossible to ignore. Lucas froze, fork halfway to his mouth. Becca gasped. Mezzanine pressed a hand to her lips, eyes flooding too fast to hide. Eva looked up at Lucas, waiting, expectation trembling inside her gaze. He nodded gently. "Yes, blue." Eva touched the reflection. "Again, blue," she repeated, the sound thin but certain. Mezzanine's breath caught audibly. She placed her hand on the edge of the table to steady herself. Tears pooled, but she blinked fiercely, unwilling to break the moment. The rest of dinner passed in a hush of soft smiles and occasional glances filled with disbelief. Eva ate more than she had in weeks. She reached for her bread without prompting. She tapped her plate once, echoing Lucas's earlier signal. The small sound made Becca beam. By the time the plates were cleared away, something subtle but unmistakable had shifted among them. The air felt lighter, warmer, not fixed but mending. After dessert, Lucas stepped out onto the balcony for a breath. The night wind was colder than he expected, slicing clean across his face. The city glittered beneath them, thousands of windows glowing like tiny stars suspended in a concrete sky. Becca followed him, closing the sliding door gently behind her. "You okay?" she asked. Lucas gripped the railing. "It's just a lot." She said a word. Becca said softly, standing beside him. "You helped her." He nodded, but the knot in his chest had returned, tighter than before. "I'm proud of her. I really am. But—" Lucas closed his eyes. "But I'm scared," he whispered. "I'm scared of caring too much, of getting close, of losing someone again." His voice cracked. What if I can't handle it?" Becca put a hand on his arm. "Dad, you don't have to be afraid to love people." "That's the problem," he said quietly. "I am." Inside the penthouse, beyond the glass, the warm light framed them like figures in a painting. And just out of sight, around the corner of the hallway, Mezzanine stood frozen, one hand pressed lightly to the wall. She hadn't meant to follow. She had simply wanted to thank Lucas. But then she heard his voice, low, raw, unraveling into the wind. She heard the crack in it, the grief he tried to bury. She stepped back before she could make a sound. Her breath shook in her chest. She had seen men break in business meetings, in courtroom negotiations, in desperate boardroom sessions, but never like this. Never in a way that felt like the breaking of a heart rather than an ego. She returned quietly to the dining room, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, composing herself with the precision of someone accustomed to wearing armor. But the armor felt heavier now, less necessary, less true. Outside on the balcony, Lucas leaned his forehead against the cool metal railing, breathing through the ache, while the city below pulsed in steady waves of light. Becca stayed beside him, small but steadfast. "You won't lose us," she whispered. Lucas didn't answer, but the wind carried the promise inward, through the glass, into the warm-lit room where a little girl had spoken her first word in 2 years. "Blue." It began as a whisper, a 30-second clip posted, anonymously on a minor office gossip account. Grainy, shaky, filmed from the mezzanine of the Wardcore lobby. Eva sitting on the marble floor, rocking. Lucas kneeling 5 feet away. A single blue bubble drifting upward like a fragile planet. The caption read, "CEO's daughter soothed by janitor?" What was going on at Wardcore? The post should have died in the noise of 1,000 meaningless uploads, but it didn't. By noon the next day, it had been reposted onto a parenting forum. By evening, onto a disability advocacy page. By midnight, a YouTube commentator uploaded a "What's really happening at Wardcore?" reaction video. And then the floodgates opened. Lucas was mopping the north hallway when his phone buzzed continuously. One alert after another. "Monsieur, Doug." Screenshots. He frowned and slid the phone back in his pocket. He didn't want to look. Not now. Not when things were finally steady. But avoidance couldn't stop noise. By the time he reached the employee break room, 2 interns were huddled over a phone. The light from the screen threw blue over their faces. "Is that the video?" one whispered. "Yeah. People think he's some kind of—" They froze as Lucas pushed the door open. Their silence was sharper than words. He walked past them, jaw tight, pretending he didn't hear. Pretending his hands weren't trembling. Mezzanine saw it an hour later. Her assistant burst in, pale and breathless. "Ms. Ward, you need to see this." The video played on her office tablet. She watched in stillness, back straight, expression unreadable. But her fingers curled against the edge of the table. Not because of the scandal, but because— Mistake. By afternoon, 3 minor tech blogs had turned it into a headline. Wardcore CEO hires janitor as child whisperer. Unqualified judgment. The comments stung more than the headlines. "This is unsafe. She's exploiting a vulnerable kid. What kind of mother is she?" Mezzanine closed her laptop and pressed her forehead to her hands. "You said the world wouldn't understand her," she whispered to the empty room. For the first time in months, she felt it again, the old fear, the one that circled her like a predator. And then she felt anger. Hot, bright, protective. She picked up her phone. "Where's Greg?" Greg Stanton strode into her office 30 minutes later, a stack of printed screenshots under his arm. "We have a PR crisis," he announced before the door even shut. Meline's voice was sharp. "We have a child, not a crisis. Watch how you speak." Greg didn't bother sitting. "Wardcore shareholders are calling. Legal is uneasy. The board wants a statement by morning." "Absolutely not." He blinked at her. "Not what?" "We are not issuing a statement about my daughter like she's a malfunctioning product." Greg set the papers down firmly. "You don't have a choice." Her eyes narrowed. "I always have a choice." He exhaled in frustration. "Look, whatever is happening between you and your janitor," finish that sentence carefully. Greg recalibrated. "Is being misconstrued. The easiest way to calm this is to suspend his access badge. Temporarily." Silence fell like a blade. Meline stood so abruptly her chair rolled back. "Absolutely not. He is the only person she—" Greg raised a hand. "It's already done." His badge was frozen an hour ago. Her breath punched out of her chest. "You did this without my approval?" "Because you were compromised, Meline. You were too close to this. Someone had to protect the company." She stared at him as if seeing a stranger. "You protected the company," she whispered. "But you broke my daughter." Across the city, Lucas held his phone in disbelief. Access suspended, effective immediately. No explanation, no warning, just a cold piece of text. Becca looked up at him, worried. "Dad, why are you shaking?" He swallowed hard. "We can't go today." "Will she know?" Becca whispered. Lucas closed his eyes. "She'll know." In the penthouse, Eva sat by the window, forehead pressed to the glass. The city below was a blur of headlights and motion. But the only movement she cared about was the elevator she usually listened for around this hour, the soft chime that told her Lucas and Becca were arriving. It didn't come. She rocked once, twice. Then she made a small humming sound, thin, high, distressed. Meline rushed in. "Eva? Honey? What's wrong?" Eva didn't look at her. She reached for the blue crayon. But instead of drawing, she snapped it in half. Meline felt the break in her bones. "No," she whispered, kneeling beside her. "Sweetheart, no, I'm here. I'm right here." But Eva wasn't listening. She rocked harder. Her breathing turned shallow. The quiet room filled with a tremor of panic that Meline couldn't touch. And she understood instantly what had happened. "You took him away from her," she said out loud, voice breaking. "You took safety away." At the emergency board meeting, the long glass table gleamed under the harsh lights. Power ties and polished watches lined both sides. Greg stood at the head, confident. "We need to distance ourselves immediately," he said. "Media outlets are framing this as negligence at best, exploitation at worst." A board member added, "The footage looks inappropriate. The janitor is untrained. We can't risk liability." Meline rose before he finished. "Untrained," she said, voice trembling with contained fury. "He taught special education for 11 years. Greg scoffed. "Then why is he mopping floors, Meline?" The room quieted. She met Greg's eyes. "Because life broke him before any of you ever knew his name." Another board member said gently, "Meline, we're concerned about your judgment." "My judgment?" Her voice sharpened. "My judgment is the only reason my daughter spoke her first word in 2 years." She pressed her palms flat against the table. "You want to talk about safety? About liability?" Her gaze swept across them. "Here's what you're missing. You're treating my daughter like an asset, and the man who helped her like a problem." Greg folded his arms. "We recommend you step down as CEO until the situation stabilizes." Silence choked the room. "Step down. Give up everything she built. All because she dared to let her child be seen." Meline straightened. "I'm not stepping down," she said. "I'm stepping up." A murmur rippled through the board. She continued, voice steady and cold as steel. "And the first step is reinstating Lucas Hale. Tonight." Greg slammed a folder shut. "You're making a mistake." "No," she said quietly. "You are." That night, the city outside the penthouse was a sea of flickering lights. The wind swept hard against the glass, rattling the frames. Eva sat alone on the floor, knees drawn to her chest, rocking softly. Half a broken blue crayon lay beside her. Meline knelt down, pulled her daughter into her arms, and whispered into her hair, "I'll fix this. I promise. I'll bring him back." Eva didn't answer, but she stopped rocking, just barely. And in the distance, far below, Meline could almost imagine. She heard the faint sound of a bubble popping, the sound of something delicate, breaking, a sound she would not let be final. The courtroom felt too still, like breath held inside 4 heavy mahogany walls. Polished benches gleamed under rows of muted ceiling lights. The air hummed with quiet tension, the kind of tension that makes every cough sound like a verdict. Lucas sat at the respondent's table beside his attorney, hands clasped tightly. He had attended courtrooms before, IEP hearings, mediation sessions, juvenile cases, but never as the one under scrutiny. Never as the man whose entire life could be dismantled by the weight of a single accusation. Across the aisle, Spencer Reed adjusted his tie. He looked exhausted, dark circles pooled under his eyes, his fingers twitching against the table's surface. He was not the villain the media had painted. He was a father scared of failing again, and the fear clung to him like a shadow. Meline sat behind Lucas, her posture straight, but her hand trembling against her knee. And beside her, small feet dangling from the bench, was Becca. Eva sat next to her, holding a small folder of drawings to her chest like a shield. The clerk rose. "All rise." The room stood as the judge entered. An older woman with silver hair pulled into a neat twist. Her gaze was sharp, perceptive, almost tired of human messes, but unwilling to let any slip. Passed her unnoticed. "You may be seated." Chairs creaked softly as everyone settled. "This is the matter of custody modification. Spencer Reed versus Meline Ward," the judge announced. She looked over her glasses. "And I understand there is concern regarding the involvement of Mr. Lucas Hale." Greg stood immediately. "Yes, Your Honor. Ward Corps would like to submit documentation showing Mr. Hale's lack of professional qualifications." "Mr. Stanton," the judge interrupted, "you are here as a witness, not as counsel. Let the attorneys speak." Greg flushed, but stepped back. Spencer's lawyer began. "Your Honor, my client believes his daughter, Eva, is currently under an unstable caregiving arrangement. He seeks clarity and protection, not removal of the mother's custody, but safeguards to ensure Eva's emotional and physical safety." Spencer swallowed hard. I want to know she's cared for. I don't want to be the dad who missed something again." Meline felt something inside her tighten. Spencer wasn't attacking her. He was afraid, deeply afraid, of being another person Eva couldn't rely on. Her lawyer rose. "Your Honor, Eva has made substantial progress under Ms. Ward's care and through the support of Mr. Hale, who has specialized experience with neurodivergent children." Greg stood again. "Specialized? He's a janitor. He lost his certification after." Please approach the stand." Lucas's heart thudded painfully. His knees felt like wet sand as he stood. Becca touched his arm, a small anchor, before he walked to the witness chair. He took the oath, sat, and folded his hands. "Mr. Hale," the judge began, "there are concerns about your qualifications. Please explain your background." He cleared his throat, voice unsteady. "I taught special education for 11 years. Grades K2. My wife, Hannah, was a pediatric nurse. We worked with kids who needed gentleness, routine, and patience." Spencer glanced at him, surprised, almost guilty. Greg stiffened. "What happened to end your teaching career?" the judge asked gently. He hesitated. His throat tightened. The courtroom blurred for a second under the weight of the memory. "My wife was diagnosed with aggressive cancer," he said finally. "I took leave to care for her. After she passed, I couldn't go back. Not because I was unqualified, but because I couldn't sit in a room full of children without feeling like I might break." Silence washed over the court. Becca bowed her head. Meline pressed a hand to her chest. Lucas swallowed. "Working nights as a janitor was the only job that didn't require me to pretend I wasn't grieving." The judge nodded, eyes softening. "And Eva?" she asked. "Why do you work with her?" A long breath. "Because she reminds me that Stillness doesn't mean emptiness. She listens with her whole body. She feels everything. She's bright, and she deserves a world that doesn't rush her or shame her. He paused. And because I know what it's like to lose someone and fear opening your heart again. But she made me try anyway. Across the room, Spencer's eyes glistened. Greg looked away. The judge tapped her pen thoughtfully. Thank you, Mr. Hale. He returned to his seat, shoulders trembling, a quiet exhale leaking out of him like a release of years he'd held tightly sealed. It was Spencer's turn to testify. He walked to the stand as though carrying a weight only he could feel. Mr. Reed, his attorney prompted, why seek modification now? Spencer twisted his wedding ring. His voice cracked. Because I'm scared. I see videos online, and I don't know what's real. I don't know if the man caring for my daughter is safe. He turned to Lucas. It's not about hating you. It's about failing her. Before and not wanting to fail again. Lucas blinked, stunned. And, Spencer added, when I look at her now, she seems happier, more present. And I don't know how to be part of that world. I'm afraid I'm not enough. His honesty rippled through the courtroom like a soft chord. For a moment, no one moved. The judge leaned back. I'd like to hear from Eva. Melline stiffened. Your Honor, I won't question her. But if she has something she wishes to show, I will allow it. Becca whispered to Eva. The little girl hesitated, then stood. She approached the bench slowly, clutching her folder. Her hands trembled, but Becca walked beside her with quiet courage. Eva placed a drawing onto the judge's desk. A house drawn with 4 figures. Melline in yellow, Spencer in charcoal gray, Becca in orange, and Lucas in blue. Above them, a single word written in uneven letters. Family. The judge studied the page. The blue was the brightest thing in the entire courtroom. Thank you, Eva, she whispered. Eva stepped back. Becca held her hand tightly. The judge picked up her gavel. After reviewing testimonies and observing the child's emotional well-being, I find no cause to modify custody. A quiet gasp swept through the gallery. Eva will remain in the primary care of Ms. Ward, the judge continued. Mr. Reed is encouraged to participate actively. And Mr. Hale, she met Lucas's eyes. You may continue your involvement with the child, with the mother's consent. Lucas stared, unable to breathe for a moment. The judge set down the drawing. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck. A crisp, resonant sound, like something breaking open, or something finally being freed. Outside the courtroom, Eva tugged on Lucas's sleeve. She pointed at the drawing still in the judge's hand. Blue, she whispered. The word was soft but steady. For the first time that day, Lucas smiled. Not out of relief, but out of recognition. Maybe some families weren't formed by blood. Maybe some were drawn in color. The space that would soon become the ward. Hale Room began as nothing special, just a forgotten corner office on the 12th floor of Ward Core. The blinds rattled softly in the afternoon breeze, and the floors still smelled faintly of disinfectant and old printer ink. It's something about the empty room felt open, expectant, as if waiting for the right hands to give it purpose. Lucas carried in the first box of painting supplies, his footsteps echoing across the bare floor. Eva followed close behind, holding a small plastic case of crayons pressed tightly to her chest. Becca strode in last, arms full of drop cloths, her face lit by curiosity. Melline arrived moments later, hair pulled back, jacket folded over her arm. She paused at the doorway. For a brief moment, the scene struck her as almost unreal. Her daughter, her niece, and this quiet man who somehow walked into their lives like a small, necessary miracle. You wasn't kidding, Becca said, surveying the room. It really is a blank canvas. Lucas smiled. Exactly what we need. They spread out the materials, rollers, brushes, trays splattered with leftover colors from old jobs. When Lucas tore open the new set of paints, the scent of fresh pigment filled the room, warm and sharp, mingling with the gentle hum of the building's air vents. Eva, Lucas said, crouching beside her, would you like to choose our first color? She blinked up at him, eyes catching reflections from the afternoon sun. Then she opened her crayon case with both hands, revealing a chaotic rainbow of half-broken sticks and sharpened points. She rummaged through them slowly, picking up one, then another, then pausing. A yellow crayon lay between her fingers. Becca leaned closer. Yellow? For the whole room. Eva shook her head. She turned toward Becca, then gently touched the girl's chest with the tip of the crayon. A soft tap. For you, she whispered. Something warm flickered across Becca's face. The girl blinked rapidly, trying to hide how much that single gesture had stunned her. Well, she said lightly, guess that makes me the sunny one. Meline's eyes softened. She sees you. Becca exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Eva wasn't finished. She rummaged again, slower this time, her tiny hand gliding across colors until she picked up a deep, ocean blue crayon. She walked to Lucas and placed it in his palm. For you, she murmured. Lucas stared at the crayon as though she'd handed him a memory he'd forgotten how to touch. The color was rich and steady, nothing flashy, nothing loud. Just present, just true, a stability he didn't know he'd become for her. Thank you, sweetheart, he said quietly. He looked up at Meline. Something passed between them, a calm acknowledgement, a shared understanding that felt deeper than gratitude. Then work began. Warm afternoon. Light spilled through the tall windows, turning the drop cloths into soft ripples on the floor. Becca cranked open the paint cans with practiced precision while Lucas taped off the baseboards. Eva dipped her fingers into a small cup of water, watching droplets gather and fall. She hummed faintly under her breath, a sound like a memory of a melody. Let's start with the corner for Becca. Lucas said, Yellow, right? Becca dipped her roller into the tray, caught off guard by how natural the motion felt. Yeah, bright enough to annoy anyone walking past. She pressed the roller to the wall, dragging it upward. The color bloomed instantly, warm, hopeful, loud in a way Eva wasn't. The sound of brushstrokes filled the room in slow, rhythmic motions, a kind of heartbeat. Then Lucas began painting his section, deep blue sweeping across the wall in patient strokes. The color felt grounding, like the shade of calm water at dawn. Eva watched him, nodding as if confirming. He'd chosen correctly. Becca paused midway through her second stroke. Hey, she said suddenly, can I try something? Lucas handed her a smaller brush. Whatever you want. Becca crouched near the opposite wall. Her strokes were hesitant at first, small shapes circled in yellow and streaked with orange. Then she grew bolder, blending blues and greens, letting the colors collide in ways that made sense only to her. Slowly, the shapes became figures, wobbly, imperfect, but full of motion. You're drawing people, Meline noted softly. Not people, Becca mumbled, without looking up. Family. She stepped back. On the wall stood 4 abstract figures, messy, mismatched, but connected by lines that swirled between them like tangled threads. More like a traffic accident, Becca said with a shrug, but her voice betrayed something tender. A chaotic family, but still together. Eve approached the wall slowly. Without a word, she placed her hand in a small tray of blue paint, then pressed her palm beside the figures, her tiny mark linking them. Meline moved toward her daughter, eyes shining. Eva, sweetie, can Mommy paint too? Eva hesitated. Then she reached out, gently pulling her mother toward the tray. The room held still for a beat. Then Meline dipped her brush into yellow, lifting it with a steady hand. She painted beside Eva's palm print, soft, strokes that connected with the blue, forming a small arc like the beginning of a sunbeam. Lucas stood at a distance, watching the 3 of them paint in silence. His chest tightened, not with grief this time, but with something quieter, something like the first breath after a long sleep. Becca glanced toward him. Guess she's including us all now. Meline breathed out a shaky laugh. She's not learning our world, she whispered. We're learning hers. Eva stepped back, examining her work. Colors crossed, lines blurred. Yellow met blue, forming shades of green that spread, like small promises. Meline looked at Lucas, voice trembling. She said, she's coloring us. Lucas felt the words settle inside him, warm and steady. As the sun dipped lower, the room glowed with soft amber light. Paint trays sat open like invitations. Crayons lay scattered on the floor. The walls, once cold and blank, now breathed with life. Patches of yellow and blue that felt like bandages, placed gently over old wounds. Eva sat in the middle of the room, drawing tiny circles on a scrap of paper. Becca leaned against the window, hair tangled, shirt speckled with yellow. Meline closed the last paint can, stretching her back with a tired sigh. Lucas looked around, the warmth, the colors, the laughter echoing faintly. "It's becoming something," he said. Meline nodded. "A place where she can feel safe. A place where all of us can," Becca added quietly. Eva lifted her drawing. A small rainbow, yellow, blue, orange, and a new color mixed in perfectly in the corner. A soft red. Lucas paused. "Red." Eva pointed at him, then at her heart. Lucas swallowed hard. The room seemed to exhale all at once. A new beginning, painted in a being, one fragile stroke at a time. And the colors held. The morning of the opening felt different from any other award corps. The building, usually sharp-edged and metallic, seemed softened by the warm gold of early sunlight. Through the tall glass windows, the world glowed like it had been washed clean overnight. Even the marble in the lobby appeared warmer, as if remembering the day Eva first trembled there and then found someone who understood how to breathe with her. Now she stood confidently beside Meline, holding a small laminated card labeled Tour Guide. The badge was crooked, clipped too high on her dress. But she didn't seem to notice. She bounced lightly on her toes as families arrived, parents holding hands with children who moved carefully, curiously, some shy, some bright-eyed. "Welcome," she whispered to each group, barely audible, but her intent shone through her eyes. She reached for Lucas's hand, tugging him forward. "Come." The ward, pale room doors slid open, color-washed, outward like a quiet sunrise, yellow spreading across one wall, deep blue anchoring another. Along the far corner, the chaotic family Becca had painted shimmered under soft ceiling lights. And at the center, the great rainbow wall, crowned by a new shade, red blended imperfectly into the arc, warm and bold, a pulse of courage. The children gasped. Some stepped forward with an instinctive trust, touched the textured patterns, traced the curves where colors met. The room felt alive, full of air that seemed to hum with possibility. "Good turnout," Becca murmured beside. Meline, arms crossed though her smile betrayed her excitement. "Didn't think we'd pull this off." "You helped make this," Meline replied, smoothing a flyaway strand of hair behind the girl's ear. Becca shrugged. "Eva chose the colors. We just followed instructions." Lucas overheard and chuckled softly. "That's what good architects do." Becca rolled her eyes, but didn't hide her grin. Eva began her tour, pointing at different sections. "Yellow, for Becca," she said. Hope, a brunette girl around 7, touched the yellow strokes. "It feels warm." Eva nodded solemnly, like a curator confirming a fact. Then she stepped toward the blue corner. "Blue for Lucas." "Safe." Lucas bowed his head, humbled. One small boy pressed his cheek to the wall, whispering cold, then warm. "It grows on you," Lucas said gently. Parents exchanged looks, some bewildered, some moved. A room built from paint, grief, courage, and second chances wasn't something they had expected. At a tech corporation, Meline stepped forward, her voice steady but soft. This room wasn't built to fix anyone. A hush spread through the crowd. Lucas moved to stand beside her. It was built to stay with them, Becca added, to give them a place they don't have to rush through. Meline nodded. "Our philosophy is simple. Stay, don't fix. Children aren't puzzles. They're worlds." A mother near the back wiped her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Eva tugged Meline's sleeve. "Rainbow." "Yes." "Mural." The colors seemed to shimmer. Yellow pulsing like quiet laughter, blue steady like an anchor, green blooming where both met, and finally the red, new and raw, glowing like a heart learning its first beat. Bursts of joy. Someone laughed. Someone else spun in a circle. It felt like the room itself exhaled, a sigh of relief, of healing. Later, after families wandered off to the refreshment table and volunteers tended to paint-covered fingers, Eva tugged Lucas's sleeve again. "Outside," she said quietly. He exchanged a glance with Meline, who followed with Becca trailing behind them. They stepped out onto the private balcony overlooking the city. Morning light spilled across the skyline, painting buildings with soft gold. A breeze swept through, carrying distant sounds of traffic, and children's laughter leaking from the open door. Eva climbed onto the bench, small hands gripping the railing as she looked up. Then she turned, eyes shimmering with certainty. "Daddy," she whispered. Lucas froze. Breath hitched. The word drifted between them like a fragile feather suspended in air. Then she added, "Mommy." Meline's knees went weak. She pressed a hand to her chest. The word didn't replace anything. It simply added to the family she had been trying to build, incomplete pieces finding their shape. Becca covered her mouth, eyes stinging. She whispered. She said it. She actually said it. Eva reached out, taking one of Lucas's hands and one of Meline's. Then she pointed upward. "Look." The sky, soft blue, streaked with the faintest hint of morning. Pink, stretched wide and endless above them. Lucas swallowed hard. "It's beautiful." Eva nodded earnestly. "Not done." Meline knelt beside her. "No." Eva shook her head, smiling in the soft way she smiled when she understood something deeper than words allowed. She leaned forward, resting her forehead briefly on both their hands. Then she whispered the question that would settle into all their hearts like a seed waiting to bloom. "Tomorrow, we paint the sky, yes?" Lucas felt his throat tighten. Meline cupped Eva's cheek. Becca leaned against the railing, eyes glistening. The breeze swept through again, lifting hair, brushing cheeks, stirring the world gently awake. Lucas answered for all of them. "Yes, sweetheart," he whispered. "Tomorrow we color the sky." And the ward, Hale Room, behind them shimmered with laughter as the morning blossomed into something bright enough to carry them forward.